Hi, my name's Jordan Banks and I'm a Leaf Filters ambassador, and today I'm going to talk you through a recent shoot I did in Snowdonia National Park. One of the multiple locations I'd scouted or recce'd and pinned down to what I wanted to shoot was the Roman Bridge in Snowdonia. I'd actually never been to this location, so I wasn't completely sure what I would use or how I would use, what sort of filters, what sort of approach, even the angle. The conditions, as you can probably see behind me, are looking pretty good there. We've got a little bit of natural light. It's not too much and not too strong, but it's breaking through the foliage pretty nicely. The colours are, as you'd expect for this time of year, pretty vibrant. I chose to shoot the Roman Bridge not at sunrise or sunset, which is sort of the typical times that you shoot landscape photos. And the main reason for this is because the foliage was so heavy in the location, which I knew, and there was very little cracks in it, that was I to shoot it at sunrise or sunset, it would actually almost become very, very black, have no real colour to it, and it would be actually a duller scene. But I knew if I had some of that lighting, it was almost acting as a softbox coming through the leaves, it would backlight it and give this sort of more atmospheric effect and actually punch out the colours in the scene. So I'm just at the moment testing out the composition and finding out if this is where I want to be, but actually where the bridge is, it's sort of not really forming a bridge because there's a bridge behind this one. So it sort of looks like a cross section, so I'm actually a bit too far into the river. I think I need to be sort of over here somewhere. So I think I've found the spot that I want by the fact that now I can see the bridge actually as a single arch. I used the lead-in line of the river to actually drag you through the scene into the bridge, and then I wanted the craggly branches and trees to actually add that real mystical feeling of that enchantment, that underworld, that sort of, you know, fantasy novel feeling that you'd get from this sort of scene, which I think we managed to achieve. So I'm certainly going to be using a polarizer in this shot because it's going to take any glare off of the water and really allow me to smooth it out. More importantly to me, actually, the leaves, while it doesn't appear to the naked eye, have quite a lot of moisture on them. So this polarizer will just allow me to get those true colours come through, and it'll pop out the glare that's from any moisture on the leaves. For me, adding a polarizer into my workflow for things like this or situations like this is absolutely essential. Really, I wouldn't be shooting autumn colours without a polarizer on, because in summer, you can find that there's not so much dew, there's not so much moisture on the leaves, so you might get away with still having that colour punch through it. Obviously green is a stronger colour, whereas if you'd have those oranges and those yellows in the autumn, then having that glare off them can really just nullify them and almost make the scene look very flat, whereas really it's actually vibrant and colourful. I was checking there the exposure compensation for the Leaf filters. So they've got an app on the phone that you can use that will tell you what you've got, and then whether you've got a 6-stop, a 10-stop, a 15-stop ND, it will tell me what exposure compensation I need to change to in an ideal world. As you can see from the two images, that one with and one without filters, if I hadn't used a polarizer, you get glare off of the foliage. The stream or the river wasn't as blurry, it was very frozen and lacked that sort of mystical atmosphere that I was going for. And then the neutral density grad obviously just allowed me that very, very subtle, even exposure throughout the scene by holding back the light in the sky. So I combined the polarizer and the neutral density and was able to get the shutter speed and the punch from the trees and the foliage around me. What's important when using a neutral density filter is that they've got a foam on the back here, and the reason for that is that it just stops any light leaks that should come into the lens when you've got, or through between the filters. So you've got to make sure that it's the first filter that you put in the holder, and then that foam presses up against the holder and will stop any light leaks. So you always want to make sure your neutral density filter is the first one in. So I've managed to hold back the sky with the neutral density grads. The ND filter actually holds back the movement of the water, and then the polarizer is just taking off any glare from the water and the leaves, so I get that real pump. Now I can almost not see anything on the back of the screen or through the viewfinder, so to compose the shot, I actually take everything off, set the exposure for what it is, just so I can actually see the scene, compose the scene, and then when I'm happy with it, I can then put everything back on. And in this case, I've actually remembered what my exposure was at, so I know when I need to bracket that I go to 25 seconds is what I was on, so I'll go back to that, and then I'll do one at 20 and then one at 30, so I'm bracketing it as well. We normally will get by with 1 or 2 filters to get the effect you want, but in this occasion I did have to use 3, and This is where Lee come into their own for me, is that because of the high quality of Lee filters, there's no degradation to the image, it's completely fine, you really wouldn't notice it, it's still perfectly sharp. Nothing happens to the image, which for me is really, really important. I can't have any sort of corruption to my image, and so having the highest quality filters that allow me to work the way I want to work and use the tools available to me to get the final outcome in camera is absolutely essential to my workflow. The landscape version will be good for a double page spread, a billboard, and then I'm thinking if I turn it portrait, if someone was to want to use that for a cover, for a guidebook, then they've got those options. So for the sake of a few minutes, I will always flip the camera and just make sure I've got a portrait and landscape version. Even if it doesn't actually work, just when it comes to a resale, it might work for what that client needs. I will often as well think about copy space. So if it's for magazines in an editorial space or covers, I will try maybe actually put the wrong composition to an image. It allows open space for copy to go for a story title or whatever it might be. National Geographic, Lonely Planet have a place to actually put their logo. So then when that comes in, it actually makes the composition of the shot look good. One of the reasons I'm such an advocate of filter use in my photography and filter use in general for photographers is that I'm a big believer in getting the shot right in camera as it was seen to the naked eye, and using Lee filters allows me to do that. So in this instance there was very, very little editing that needed to be done, just minor standard raw adjustments such as levels and curves and a little bit of vibrance and contrast maybe. But the primary thing was really just taking the time to clone out the rope swing that had been tied over one of the trees, so I had to clone that out. But other than that, very little was done to this in post-processing. I'm really, really happy with the final outcome of this image. It has that mystical, it has that ethereal feeling that I was looking for. I'm really happy with the work that I did in Snowdonia, but I think this one probably is the winner for me.